Good evening, everyone. So nice to have everyone here at VBS. Let's all stand up together. Let's welcome each other to this wonderful place. Stand up, say hello to the person next to you. Welcome them to Valley Beth Shalom. We're going to do a little Hine Matov and then the anthem, okay? Put your arms around each other. Let's sing how great it is to be together. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam. So nice to have everyone here. If you could just take us, stay standing, stay standing. If you could just take a moment, turn your cell phone ringer off. Just take a minute to do that. And we're going to do the Israeli national anthem, the Hatikva, by our very own cantor, Toby Schwartz. We are doing both anthems. Yes. We're doing both the national anthem and Hatikva. Please go ahead.
National anthem.
Custom dictates we do the American anthem first.
Yes. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Kol od balevav penima, nefesh Yehudi homiya, ulfate mizrach kadima, ayin letzion Sophia. Oh, lovda tikvatenu, tikva bat shnotam hayim, liotam chofshi beyartzenu, Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim, liotam chofshi beyartzenu, Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim.
Maybe seated.
Okay, good. Good evening, everyone. There's a very famous story of the Kotzker Rebbe, great 19th century Jewish Hasidic master. A young man once came to the Kotzker and said, Rebbe, I've lost my faith in God. And the Rebbe says, how did that happen? And he says, well, I looked into the world, and what I see in the world in front of me is suffering, is pain, is destruction. And I can't imagine that there's a God who would endorse a world like this. I can't believe in God. And the Rebbe looked into the boy's eyes for a long time, and he said, so much pain, so much suffering, so much destruction, but why do you care? And the boy was taken aback by this question. What do you mean, why do I care? He said, why do I care, Rebbe? How could you not care? How could you not respond? How could you not cry when you see the destruction around you and the lives broken and the dreams that are sullied? How could a human being not care? But the Rebbe looked into the boy's eyes even deeper and said, but why do you care? And the boy got flustered. He said, what do you mean, why do I care? How can you not? How can a human being walk the world and not be moved by this, and not be touched by this, and not be saddened by what you see? And the Rebbe just looked at him again and asked him the same question, but why do you care? And now the boy just began to weep. And he said, because there's nothing else to be done. That if you walk the world and your soul doesn't respond to the suffering in front of you, that there's no echo in the world of that suffering, then what has become of us? And the Rebbe said, you care that much. If you care that much, then God exists. If you care that much, then the world goes on. So tonight is an expression of caring. And we thought all of us needed this tonight because there's political turmoil everywhere you look. There's turmoil in Israel, there's turmoil here, there's turmoil around the world. And we needed an expression of caring. And tonight, we're fortunate to welcome a wonderful organization that really is the embodiment of our Jewish caring. To introduce tonight's program and tonight's speaker, I'd like to introduce a leader in our own youth community. Maya Plofkin is 15. She's a 10th grader at Taft Charter High School. In her free time, she enjoys her friends, babysitting, playing the ukulele, and cooking. So if anybody is looking for a ukulele-playing chef who can babysit, this is it. She is a leader in our USY. She attends every single week. She has served as Israel Affairs Vice President for our USY here, and she's on the regional board where she is the coordinator of culinary and cuisine. When I was a USY leader, I was also involved in culinary and cuisine, but on the consumption side, not on the production side. She participates in the American Jewish Committee's program of Leaders of Tomorrow, talk about Israel and advocate and combat anti-Semitism. She recently went to Washington, D.C. to speak with political staffers, including the Chief of Staff for Representatives Gomez and Sherman, about bills and acts pertaining to anti-Semitism in Israel. And tonight, Maya is going to introduce our program. Please welcome Maya Plofkin.
Hello. So tonight, our guest speaker is Farah Shamolian. Hi, I'm Maya, and tonight our guest speaker is Farah Shamolian. So Farah serves as the director of IsraAid's Humanitarian Professionals Network. It's an international network of high-caliber professionals that have an interest in humanitarian aid and disaster relief. Most recently, she has implemented public health and humanitarian programs with IsraAid for refugees in Saloniki, Greece, and was IsraAid's head of mission for the emergency response to the Volcan de Fuego volcano eruption in Guatemala. Farah's experiences of expertise include community engagement and health sciences, disease prevention, humanitarian aid, and emergency responses to disasters. She has applied her passion of community engagement and disease prevention in the United States and internationally, in India, Israel, Greece, Guatemala, and Haiti. She earned a graduate degree from the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health with a specialization in global health and sustainability. She lives in Los Angeles, California. Please welcome Farah Shamolian.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. She didn't mention that I'm from Tarzana, so I'm very much part of the 818 land here, and I'm very happy to be here with you all tonight. I just want to pull this up. I'm just going to bring this forward. Perfect. So such a privilege to be here with you tonight so that I can tell you a little bit more about IsraAid. But before I begin, I'd love to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got started with IsraAid. So I was born and raised here in Tarzana, and I've always wanted to do something about things I've heard in the news. We oftentimes hear about disasters happening, whether that's a tsunami or a mudslide or a hurricane. We're constantly bombarded by all of these natural disasters, epidemics, pandemics, and that led me to get my master's in public health. And once I pursued my master's, I ended up doing my field studies in India. I lived in India for about 3 months, implementing sanitation and hygiene programs in slum communities. And once I got a taste of that, I said, I'm done. This is what I'm going to dedicate my life to. And I was immensely passionate about kind of the intersection between the local and the global. And after I got back, I wanted to find a place where I can kind of express myself in that way. And I went to different international humanitarian orgs. I worked at International Medical Corps for a bit. I worked at a few local community Jewish organizations. And I still wasn't, happy with my kind of expression of my global humanitarianism. And I heard the CEO of IsraAid speak at a lecture at UCLA, and I saw a video of him kind of on the island of Lesbos, welcoming in refugees with an IsraAid shirt, with a Magen David, bringing in Syrian refugees. And I was in the crowd and I said, wow, this is world peace. And I immediately ran up to him and I told him my background, and we kind of got acquainted. And 2 months later, I was deployed to Greece myself. And as a Farsi-speaking woman, I was able to bring my Farsi-speaking capabilities to the refugee crisis. And because there is a minority within the refugee crisis, that being Farsi-speaking and Farsi-speaking Afghani and Iranian refugees, I was able to fill an immense need there as a public health professional. So I lived in Greece for about 3 months, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And I got back, had 1 month of rest and recovery, and then we heard about the volcano eruption in Guatemala. And of course, I was here and ready, and they deployed me, and I was the head of mission for our Guatemala response as well. And so I lived in Guatemala for about 2 months, leading the program there. And in both countries right now, we still have programs, which I will tell you more about later. But before I go into my experiences, I wanted to give you a little bit of a background about IsraAid. What is IsraAid, and what do we do? So IsraAid was formed in 2001. If this will go, let's see. Great. So IsraAid was established in 2001. We are a non-governmental, apolitical humanitarian organization. And I will show you this quick 1-minute clip to give you a little bit of a background about what we're about. It was working perfectly before, I promise. So when we all hear disasters in the news, how many times have you heard Israel being the first ones in? Can I get a show of hands? Yeah. So we are part of that group. And so within 72 hours, we send teams on the ground when disasters strike. And we're very proud about the fact that we're not only there when the disaster strikes, but we do long-term programs. So there's this kind of terminology, it's called FILO, first in, last out. And in the humanitarian sector, it's very important to make sure that you understand that it's not about giving the food and providing water within the first 10 days, but it's the months after where the needs even grow more and more. And so these are kind of the sectors that we provide services in right now when disasters strike immediately and long-term as well. And one of the greatest strengths we bring to the table is kind of our Israeli expertise. And so that's our water technology, psychosocial support, mental health. There's a lot of trauma support and expertise coming out of Israel. So we bring all of that expertise to people in need around the world. So in 2018, we've responded to about 6 natural disasters. These are all the countries that we currently work in. There are 19 countries. Can anyone tell me what that country all the way on the right is? Small. All the way on the right, that green dot? No. Oh, you can't see the map? It's right here. Yeah. It was a little bit. Anyways, it's in the Fiji Islands. It's Vanuatu. There was a really, I never knew about Vanuatu, and I'm learning more and more as these disasters strike. But a few years ago, Vanuatu was devastated by a hurricane, and we've been implementing programs there, and we got recognized by the president of Vanuatu not too long ago for our work there. So since 2001, we've responded to 46 disasters in 46 countries. And so we currently have programs in 19 countries. And you can see those 19 countries here: Africa, in the US, in Europe with the refugee crisis, in Japan after the tsunami. We still have programs there. Actually, the program in Japan has taken off so much that they've developed their own nonprofit based on the programs that we've implemented there. It's called J Response. That's a little bit more about what I've just talked about. And so just want to delve deep into some of the stories behind these disasters and our response to these disasters. So who remembers the image of the young boy being washed up on the shores of Greece and Lesbos? Once that image came out, you know, the outpour of support and humanitarian aid was booming. And so we were on the shores of Lesbos, and I personally wasn't there, but we had medical teams, we had search and rescue teams, we had people that were pregnant and needed to be delivered right on the shores of Lesbos, and we had many deliveries. And that's actually Susan Sarandon. She's worked with our programs in Germany. So we have programs two programs in Greece on the island of Lesbos where refugees are coming in, and one in the mainland in Thessaloniki where I lived and worked. And the third is in Germany. In Germany, we do mostly integration with the refugees there, providing them with trainings and psychosocial support. We actually just got recognized by Chancellor Angela Merkel a few months ago for our work with integration. We got, out of many organizations, IsraAid was chosen as the organization that was doing the best integration work with refugees. And so a very interesting story that I'd like to share with you. This man here, he is a Yazidi refugee that we helped on the island of Lesbos. We brought him in on lifeboats, and he was in touch with our CEO, Yotam, on Facebook, you know, when disasters strike. And he made his way to Houston, Texas. This was at the beginning of the refugee crisis in 2014. He eventually got granted asylum, and he was in Houston. And he would message our CEO whenever a disaster would strike, how can I help? I want to help. When a disaster strikes, send me. I want to help. Eventually, Hurricane Harvey struck in Houston in 2017. He messaged Yotam and he said, how can I help? Yotam said, okay, you can help. So we do debris removal when disasters strike locally in the US. So we team up with Team Rubicon, which is a veterans-based organization, their emergency response organization based in the US. And so we team up with Team Rubicon, and we sent him over with our team, and he ended up wearing an IsraAid shirt and was volunteering with us. So this is kind of like a full picture from being a refugee and kind of wanting to give back on his own after that. Another really striking story was in Nepal. I don't know if you guys remember the really devastating earthquake that struck in 2015. Our search and rescue teams were there for many days, and when a disaster strikes, you have about 3 to 4 days maximum when a disaster strikes to be able to find bodies alive. And on the 4th day, a lot of organizations were giving up. And we said we want to continue going. There was a building here where most of the people made it out alive, and they said, our cleaning lady didn't make it out alive. We want to get our cleaning lady out. And everyone was really wanting to make this happen. And so they went in, and they had this monitor that was able to hear a person's breath. And our CEO, Yotam Polisar, he speaks Nepalese. He's lived in Nepal for several years. And so he heard a little bit of a breath, and they were able to pull her out alive. This is Krishna Patel. She was the cleaning lady from the building, and it's a very highly successful story. And so we didn't only help them immediately with search and rescue, but we actually just are leaving this year. So that's in 2019 we're leaving. And so suicide is one of the biggest killers in Nepal. And so we're able to do psychosocial programs with them and livelihood programs with women. So we have this program called Honey Aid, where we've sent an Israeli beekeeper from the Golan, and he's now going all over the world teaching people how to cultivate honey. And now these women are generating income from cultivating this honey. And so we have Honey Aid operating in Nepal, in Peru, in Mexico, and I think it's going to be launching in one more country soon. Hurricane Maria, that's kind of one of my most favorite countries we work in right now, because of the lack of response that was made and how we were able to fill so many gaps. And so not only are we building a water filtration system there for communities who don't have access to water, but we're training local community members on safe water techniques. So if you see this sticker, it's you get that once you've been trained in the safe water techniques. So there is a beautiful picture that I don't have here, but of all the homes that you see that have this beautiful droplet with an IsraAid sign that they're trained. So when the next disaster happens, they're able to draw on their expertise. And so we currently still have many mental health, psychosocial programs there dealing with the post-disaster relief there. So we've also kind of responded to the Santa Rosa wildfires. I don't want to kind of talk about that right now. In 2018, we've responded to 3 in particular: India, the Philippines and Indonesia, and Guatemala. And Guatemala, I can tell you a little bit more about because I led the mission there at the beginning. And so there was a volcano eruption that happened, and about 2,000 people unfortunately died. And many schools were devastated. And when I arrived, many of the kids were out of schools. So we partnered with the Ministry of Education. And during that 1 month, we trained the local psychologists. And this is kind of one of IsraAid's expertise, is to be able to train those people from top that are able to affect change on the grounds. So we trained the 6 major psychologists that were the teachers to these 10,000 students that were affected by the volcano. And so they were able to we train them on psychological first aid, resilience building, and so this is a picture of one of the trainings that we had. And so currently, right now, our program is being implemented all over Guatemala, and we're developing a DRR program, a disaster risk reduction program, which is it's a kind of a prevention program for when future disaster strikes, they'll be able to know what to do and be more resilient as a community. And so here are a few other disasters, North Carolina and Florida. I'll tell you a little bit more about our programs here because it's really exciting that we'll be able to deploy professionals here from the U.S. now that will go hand in hand with our U.S. teams. And this was the first time that we sent many volunteers from Los Angeles who did debris removal work in North Carolina and Florida post-Hurricane Florence and Hurricane Michael. This is the most recent emergency disaster that happened, and one that's very close to us, the wildfires. And this is something we can't forget because we all smelled the smoke. We all kind of endured that pain. And so we have amazing programs there, and I'd like to show you a video that we actually just got. It's a new video, so I'm happy to share it with you today. Turn the lights off. Do you want to try?
We wanted to put Paradise on the map, but this was not how we wanted to do it.
I'm working with a nonprofit by the name of IsraAid. We're an organization based out of Israel, but we work in about 19 countries worldwide right now, giving relief after disaster situations.
So IsraAid in the U.S. came 3 years ago. It's really important for us to have Americans go hand in hand with Israeli professional colleagues around the world and help save lives, bridge people, and build back communities.
I lived here 18 years. I've built a home here. I've built my career here. The sense of loss of your community was not something I really ever thought about.
When IsraAid came in, one of the local organizations here in Paradise that we've decided to partner with is the Boys and Girls Club.
I knew that Israel did some amazing work. However, I had no clue that IsraAid had such a far reach.
Both of us are working many years with IsraAid in different places in the world, working with children, being therapists and being also specialists of dealing with trauma.
And when you have a disaster of this magnitude, it really makes people stop and think about what's really important in life, you know, and really what it's about is helping your neighbor. Right now, I just want to see my community put back together as best I can.
As you can see in these photos, we've done programs with the police department and the Boys and Girls Club, kind of like I told you before, training the trainers, so offering them best practices and trauma techniques so that they can build resiliency after the disaster. And to think that this Chico, 90,000 people live there, and 99% of the whole place was devastated. I mean, it's really tragic, and we feel very privileged to be able to make a difference there. And so this brings me to kind of why I'm here tonight and how I got here and why I'm not on the ground anymore. So we have two entities within IsraAid. We have IsraAid Global and IsraAid US that was formed 2 years ago. And so our mission here with IsraAid US is to be able to help the needs on the ground on another level. And we're able to do that through multiple modes. And the first one is through this unique program that I'm leading. It's called the IsraAid Humanitarian Professionals Network. And the three pillars of the IsraAid Humanitarian Professionals Network, which is short and it's really long, it's short for IHPN, are to engage, recruit, and deploy. So we have a monthly networking session for professionals from majorly three sectors: medical, mental health, and engineering. And we provide trainings from our IsraAid experts. We just had one last Thursday. It was a training it was an emergency response simulation. We had a room of 50 people of different backgrounds wanting to be involved with IsraAid, wanting to engage in humanitarian aid. And so once we have these engagement sessions, we'll eventually be deploying people from this network. And so, as you can see, we've already deployed a few people here. We sent a few missions out from the Bay Area already, where we work in a refugee camp in Kenya, in Kakuma, Kenya, where about 200,000 people currently live. Generations of people have lived in this refugee camp, unfortunately, and there's little to no medical care available there. And so our IsraAid Israeli team already has a roster of people that they draw on. And so through this IHPN program, we're building a roster here in the US that will be able to respond to disasters and go hand in hand with our Israeli teams for immediate response and long-term recovery. And so we've gained a little bit of recognition. We were just honored by the city of Beverly Hills on Wednesday. And so we're very excited about the launch of this program, and I'd urge everyone here to spread the word and share it with your networks that we are looking for professionals here in the US. And we also have programs for youth. We have this unique two-part educational program that we implement in schools here all over. I've implemented them in schools here in LA. One is a refugee board game where we've developed, which kind of gives them a better taste of what it's like to be a refugee. The game is called The Journey. And these children, we just had a session the other day, they learn about empathy, they learn about kind of Israel's leading role in disaster response. And so it's very engaging, and we're very proud of that as well. We have the IsraAid Humanitarian Fellowship for college students, where we select 14 students from all over the U.S. to do meaningful work, a year's time of work, 3 months or 2 months abroad to one of our programs. We assign them to one of our field programs, and then coming back on campus and doing advocacy work. We've already done this for 2 years, and we actually we're in the interviewing process right now for a third group of fellows, and so hopefully we'll be deploying them this summer. And that kind of brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm happy that I was able to share with you a little bit more about IsraAid's global work and what we're doing here in the U.S. And I urge you all to help spread the word, whether that's going on social media and sharing it or spreading the word within your friends and family and synagogue. We have many engagement programs here in Los Angeles, and we're very lucky to have donors who have funded the programs here in LA. Will hopefully be launching in the Bay Area and New York and maybe Miami soon. And so we're really creating a movement here. So we'd be happy to welcome you, be part of this movement with us. So thank you so much for having me. Sure. Before I forget, I want to thank Marcy and Scott for organizing this. Thank you so much.
We have a few minutes to chat, so thank you so much for your presentation. Help us understand a little more detail. So there's a disaster someplace, an earthquake, a hurricane, a fire. I imagine that there's a number of governmental and non-governmental agencies that rush in. Here in America, it's the Red Cross. Elsewhere, there's other organizations. How does IsraAid decide what to do, who to do it for? How does that process work? How do you intervene in the middle of the chaos of a disaster to try to figure out the very best place to apply these resources?
That's actually a really good question, because before I started working on the field, I had that same question. And so once you kind of enter the field, you understand kind of the nuances. And so for me, understanding all the players when a disaster strikes, and kind of, there was a statistic recently that showed there are about 100,000 international organizations here in the U.S. And so imagine all of these orgs are, when a disaster strikes, they want to show their logo, they want to show their name, they want to help, and many donors want to help. And so for us, we want to see where we can fill a gap. And so we usually go to those communities that aren't really seen in the news. And so we do needs assessments. And so we go on the ground, and our teams are equipped, and it depends on the disaster and kind of the situation there. But we usually kind of try to go to those communities that aren't in mainstream kind of media. And so that's our approach.
And so take me to the next step. So a team of needs assessment shows up.
Yeah.
And what happens next? What are they looking for?
So it depends on the disaster, because so for example, the earthquake in Nepal, the immediate need there was, there are people under the rubble, they need help. And there were other international organizations there, but few wanted to stay for the extra days. So we filled a gap there. We went in, and that's what we did in Nepal. In Puerto Rico, and a lot of this develops over time. The beginning is very blurry. There are so many needs and so many people who need help. So we provide the most important needs within the first kind of month there. So for example, in Guatemala, when the volcano eruption happened there, we saw that many hundreds of people were living in shelters. And so many of these shelters didn't have running water, they didn't have access to showers or bathrooms, they didn't have any sanitation or hygiene kits. And so we got funding to be able to provide that to people. And so whether that's creating a makeshift shower for a shelter, that's what we did, or providing water, providing food. And then every week you're assessing the important needs that need to be met for those weeks that are coming, and then for months to come. And that's where IsraAid's strength lies, is we really want to help people not only in their times of need, but to be able to be resilient and bounce back after these disasters. In Guatemala, I met this kid, he was 7 years old. He lost 8 of his classmates from the volcano eruption. And for us, it was being able to help him and his friends and his peers through our trainings, kind of develop resiliency and knowing how to cope with his loss and his trauma. And I actually, they WhatsApp me, all of the beneficiaries that I've worked with, they send me pictures, they WhatsApp, and hearing good news from them makes me feel really good. It's kind of the success of the work that we do.
Now, tell me who the people are. So IsraAid itself must have an administrative staff, right? And you have these people that do needs assessment.
Yeah.
So when you come into a place like Guatemala, like Nepal, like Chico, and you determine this is what they need, who are the people that come to do this work? Are they volunteers? Are they professionals? Are they people taking time off from other jobs? How does that work?
So thus far, it's been volunteers from Israel. We usually have a head of mission, which we sent, which is a hired staff. And so they've either been kind of part of our other disaster response missions, or they've worked within kind of the IsraAid framework. And then we send in the following volunteers that need to kind of address the needs. And so when I was in Greece, for example, and this is something that I'm very proud of, is that we hired many Arab-speaking Israelis. And so the need was there, and so we went into the schools there, into the social work schools, and so we recruited professionals that are Arab speaking to implement our programs in Greece. And so, for example, I lived alongside a Palestinian woman in Greece, and not to think, you know, not only are we implementing these programs, but there are so many opportunities for bridge building here that not a lot of people really recognize, you know, whether that's living and working with a Palestinian woman, or kind of wearing the IsraAid shirt and working with an Israeli, being able to talk about Israel is, I think, an important thing.
And the work you're doing here, you're recruiting a crew of American professionals. You said medical, mental health, and engineering. So if somebody signs up and says, I'm a dentist, or I'm a doctor, or I'm a builder, I'm on a list. And when you determine there's a need, you call and say, are you ready to move to Nepal for a month? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, they're first welcome to join our sessions. Right. So we have different trainings every month. Uh-huh. And then when the opportunity does arise, we do call upon them. So for example, I'm sending a mission out to Kenya in April of pediatricians. So there's actually a local resident here we're sending from the Valley. She's a pediatrician. She's going with 2 other Bay Area doctors, and they're going to work in a refugee camp that we work in. And so it depends on the need and kind of the programs that we have. Some of them will be for emergency response missions, and some of them will be for our long-term programs. And so it's exciting, yeah.
So you said at the beginning that this is not political, but I have to imagine that this somehow changes people's image of Israel. So how have you experienced that? How does the local populace being helped by IsraAid change their perceptions of who Israelis are, what Israel is, where it is in the world?
It's a really good question. You know, we really pride ourselves in kind of doing our work for the work, the humanitarian work, the human-to-human providing aid, and to the highest level professionalism. And if there are some kind of outputs that come out of that, we're happy about it too. And I have several stories where I've been on the ground. For example, in Greece, I made very close friends with a few Syrian refugees, and they invited me to their home one night, and they said, we made this big meal, and they told me about the meal that they made, and it had meat involved, and I said, I'm sorry, I keep kosher. And he asked me, he says, what's kosher? And at that moment, I saw something like click in his brain, like, wow. And I told him, you know, this is the same thing, halal, like is for you, kosher is the same for us in Judaism. And I just, that look in his eyes will always stay with me, just like that feeling that I got, that, you know, he understood. He probably never met a Jewish woman, let alone be a Persian Jewish woman. And so kind of there's so many of these stories of kind of where we didn't really actively want this to happen, but, you know, it's kind of like a soft diplomacy tactic in a way.
Israel has it's more than its share of trauma. So I'm sure there's a great deal of expertise both in search and rescue and in trauma and in disaster relief, just given Israel's own experiences. How does the experience of sending Israelis to other parts of the world, how does it change the Israelis? When they come back to Israel, how are they different?
Oh, wow. You should see them on the ground. They're so excited because you know that Israeli enthusiasm, you know, they all kind of got that powwow that they want to make a difference more so. And a lot of the international organizations, they know that about IsraAid. And so we're known to be the Israelis know how to get things done. For example, Team Rubicon, they always say that you guys accomplish more in one day than we do in 1 week. And so yeah, they have a lot of pride and they bring it back to their communities in a very powerful way. For example, when I was in Guatemala, I lived alongside a Brazilian Jewish woman who is about 70 years old, who's an art therapist, and she was kind of leading our psychological programs in Guatemala. And now, you know, whenever a disaster strikes, we draw on her. Her name is Celia, and so she's done work in Colombia, she's done work in Brazil, and so yeah, it's you know, we're really creating a movement of people that want to make a difference in the world. Yeah,
and you grew up. Where did you grow up?
In Tarzana.
In Tarzana. Where did you go to high school?
At Taft.
You went to Taft.
Yeah, my parents are right there.
Those are your parents. Right. I hope you're proud of your daughter, right? Right, good. She's not going to meet a Jewish dentist in the Philippines, but we'll take care of that, okay? How has it changed you? How has this work changed you?
Really good question. It's really something else when you're able to kind of going back to your story and kind of how I opened up the evening and kind of hearing all of the disasters, hearing the devastation. I never thought that I could be a person that could do something about anything. And who is one person, you know, how can I make a difference? And when the opportunity came up and when you're able to see the change you're able to make in a person's life in one day, it's like, wow, that's amazing. And not only that, it gives you so much perspective about life and kind of living and being in Los Angeles. There are so many trivial issues that we kind of deal with on a day-to-day basis, but we should continue to be and feel blessed for all that we do have, you know, access to water, you know, electricity, kind of these basic needs that we have every single day are very much taken for granted sometimes. And so I try to kind of live that being here in LA, but it's a little bit difficult. We get lost in the traffic and the bad weather. It's really cold.
Yeah. Today it dropped to a frigid 68 degrees, so I put my parka on and made my way down Ventura Boulevard.
So cold.
Yeah, with my snowshoes. Who funds this? I mean, it's got to be expensive to send a rescue team to Nepal and then keep them there for a month. Aside from all the materials and other kinds of things, who funds IsraAid?
Yeah, so we have donors all around the world. Many of the kind of different orgs that support us come from the U.S., many foundations and local private donors here in the U.S., but also you'd be surprised, the UN, the World Bank, other international kind of humanitarian orgs support us as well. And they partner with us in the Caribbean, in South Sudan. They're funding most of our programs there. So we get a mixture of local donors here in the U.S. and international kind of private NGOs as well. So,
good. I'm sure you have some questions. This is Louise. Let's switch microphones. Use this one. And Louise plays. Louise, take this microphone. I'll take that one. This is a better one. And if you just use the mic to ask your question, the people at home can hear you. Hi, Claudia. David?
Does any money come from, two questions. Does any money come from the Israeli government or Israel itself to support IsraAid? And the second question is, you got a child therapist, whatever, somebody who you said was going to be going out there or out to some disaster. How does that person get there? Does IsraAid pay the transportation and all the expenses along those lines, or does a volunteer have to participate in the financing of their volunteerism?
Good question. So the first question, very little funding from the Israeli government. I don't know exactly how much and when, but I know that it's really nothing. And the second question, so it depends on the circumstance and the disaster. Thus far, the professionals that we've sent, they wanted to pay their way, kind of to give back, and they had the means to do so. And so we are able to, make it work based on the professional, but it really depends on each case. And we do have connections to different flight companies that sponsor some flights for us, and Airbnb and whatnot. So we're able to make it happen from a case-to-case basis.
You're talking about going to Greece, Guatemala, Puerto Rico, Nepal. Each of these countries, the people that are involved in the disaster are speaking a different language. How is this working? Who speaks those languages? You did mention one person spoke Nepalese, but you, for example, the Syrian family, how are you communicating with them? I'm assuming they don't speak Farsi.
So we were able to speak in English. Many Syrians spoke English. But for each country, we have local staff that speak that language. Israel is a melting pot. And so we're able to kind of draw on all the languages that exist within Israel. And we have many strengths here. My Spanish that I took for 2 years in high school came in handy in Guatemala. And
yeah, I'm sure it did.
Very much so. And so, yeah, or we hire local translators to help us. And kind of one of the things we also do is we kind of hire locally from the community. So whether that's hiring a Greek staff to work with the Greek population and be a translator there. And so each time is something unique, and we make it work.
Yeah. Israel's one of the very few places where you can pretty much find every language of the world. Right, trying to get on the number 4 bus in Jerusalem. Right.
It's true.
Filipino, Arabic, Spanish, English, French, Hebrew, good Hebrew, bad Hebrew. Right. So I imagine there's a lot of using that population is one of the resources. Who's got the mic? Judy.
Hi. I wanted to thank you for your presentation. It was excellent, and I've been supporting your organization for a while now. I'm a big fan. I was just curious, actually, because I don't know. So if people volunteer from the U.S., do they pay their way to the other countries to do the volunteer work? I'm just curious.
She just said that it goes case by case. We just talked. It goes case by case.
I heard what she said, but I didn't understand if, like, the doctors who are coming, the pediatricians.
They offer transportation, but often the volunteer says, "I'll pay for itself, and you keep the money."
Okay.
Right. So you can, and they have arrangements with travel.
Okay, I must have missed it. Sorry.
No, it'd be good.
That's okay.
Judy's a professional. You should talk to her.
Yeah, let's talk.
Has there ever been a country that has not allowed IsraAid in?
Ooh.
So it's a really good question. Yes and no. We always find a way in. So Indonesia is an example. They didn't want to, well, I'd rather not talk about it, but yeah.
So Farah, thank you. I also want to thank you. It was a very good presentation. Who founded IsraAid, and when did it start?
So in 2001, it was founded by someone by the name of Shahar Azani, and he got together with a few other, individuals who really wanted to make a difference and save people in need around the world and bring Israeli expertise to people in need in the world, and started from a small group and kind of grew very big, and now we have 2 co-CEOs, Voni Glick and Yotam Poliser, and we have a staff of about 30 in Israel that are leading our global operations from this office in Tel Aviv, and they're all amazing professionals doing amazing work around the world, and it's very hard to get a hold of them because everyone's in a different airport every day. So yeah.
If you need accountants, these two guys are really good. Imagine there's a disaster and you need an audit like
You'd
tomorrow.
be surprised.
You need
You'd
to
be
send
surprised.
You need
We
to send in
really-
an audit team to go over the books. These guys will go in a minute. They'll pay their own transportation, right?
Those skills
I
are
can
very
see you
needed.
guys in a khaki uniform with helmets and pencils, and calculators. I think you got it down. Forensic
I'll be in
accounting.
touch.
Tony, hi.
Hi. I'm curious how you differ from the Red Cross, and if you do anything alongside the Red Cross and how they feel about IsraAid.
Good question.
I can't answer that because I've never really worked with them. Many of these international aid orgs. So when a disaster strikes, this is something that I didn't know. There's this whole coordination process, and there are these cluster meetings where all of the organizations that are present for the local disaster that has happened come to these meetings, these cluster meetings. And so you have everyone sitting at a table talking about the different gaps that they're going to fill. So the Red Cross says, we're going to set up a local hospital. Some other person say that they're going to offer food, they're going to provide food. Another person said they're going to provide shelter. And so that's where we're able to see where the major gaps are and how an organization can bring their strengths to the table and be able to actually make a difference. And so these coordination meetings really help make a difference to sometimes even partner with these orgs. So many times that's where we partner with UNICEF or we partner with Red Cross if it's necessary, and we're able to do that. And so it's wonderful to see when in times in need, people coming together and accessing the different resources that the different orgs have, so they can be able to make the impact and the change that we have little time to make. So nice. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it depends on the situation and whatnot, but we'd be happy to talk to you and see if there's an opportunity.
She's another one. So you got Judy in the back, and you got Tony here, and the two accountants in the front. We've already got a team going here.
And I have a microphone right now. So, and the sort of a related question to that, we see things on the news of where the Israelis come and set up field hospitals, and I was under the impression that was covered by the Israeli government.
Yeah, that's the IDF. The IDF puts the field hospital together, and our teams are working alongside with the IDF. So we're not necessarily from the Israeli government, but we're the humanitarian team that's working with the IDF's field hospital, for example, with Ebola in Sierra Leone.
So you coordinate with them too? Okay.
Yeah.
It's coming.
I can hear you though.
No, but you got to do it so the folks at home can hear.
I wanted to follow up on the next to last question. Who calls these coordinating meetings, and where do you meet? How do they put it? Who's putting them together, and what kind of groups are they?
That's a really good question. So for each location, a different organization leads. So let's say there's different clusters. So for example, when a disaster happens, there are multiple responses. So there's an education response, there's a water, sanitation, hygiene response, there's kind of protection, mental health. And so for each sector, there's an organization that leads. So it's usually UNICEF that leads these meetings and they coordinate it. But in South Sudan, for example, we're the lead for 2 of these meetings for the sectors. So we're proud to be leading those efforts in South Sudan. And so, for example, when I was in Greece, it was UNICEF, and when I was in Guatemala, it was UNICEF as well.
called you to lead this when you are the coordinator?
So we work with the local agencies, whether that's the UNHCR or the local government. Each time it's a little bit different. But yeah, we coordinate with the local government and other aid orgs, for sure.
There's a network.
And many times we meet with the local prime minister or to be able to see how we can fill the needs there. So in Guatemala, we met with the prime minister. We were able to talk to see how we're able to make an impacting change.
Hi, Farah. Thank you so much. Can you walk me through the fires in Chico? How did IsraAid get the call, and how were you on the ground within 72 hours?
So,
pull the microphone a little
sure.
closer so we can hear you. There you go.
Can you hear me? Okay. So in Chico, we actually, most of our team was in LA, and we heard about the fire. I remember Yotam, our CO, was there, and we coordinated one of our staff from the Bay Area to go immediately and assess the needs, and immediately they were able to find many gaps. There were many, kids in shelters who kind of needed a safe space, and schools were out of session, obviously. And there were many outbreaks also happening in these shelters. And so that was another problem on top of a problem. And so after we did that initial assessment, and a lot of what we do in these first few days is to develop partnership with local organizations and see how we can fill a gap. And so we saw that there was a gap with these service providers, the Boys and Girls Club, the police department, the local city officials. And so they were providing so many needs. And we saw that there was an opportunity for us to help these service providers with self-care, simple enough. And so we did self-care trainings for those service providers that were giving so much. And then from there, we ended up doing many programs with the Boys and Girls Club, trainings. And so yeah, that's a little bit of kind of the picture of what Chico looked like and what it looks like now.
Who's got the mic? Anyone else have a question they'd like to ask? Last question.
Sure.
So tell us again. We want to contribute resources, time, interest, stay in touch with IsraAid. How do you do that?
Me. I'll be happy to share some business cards with you afterwards. You can always visit our website on social media and whatnot. So our website is IsraAid.org, Facebook, IsraAid, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. And there's a short application to join the Humanitarian Professionals Network, and you can find that online as well. I'll be happy to share that link with you if you email me. And thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. And I heard this is the first of the Israel, the new kind of program that you have. So I wish you all much success for the future. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you, Farah, again for coming, for Rabbi Feinstein for leading us, and for learning all about this. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for Maya for being here and introducing and starting our hopefully growing youth program regarding our community activism. And if anyone would like to join our committee, we are welcoming any and all volunteers. So thank you very much again.
Thank you all. Take care. Shabbos morning, if you happen to be in the neighborhood, Professor Ken Stein, Emory University, chairman of the Israel Studies Department, will be here to discuss American foreign policy in a changing Middle East. And on Tuesday, March 5th, Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the ADL, is going to be our guest as well to talk about hate and anti-Semitism. But take the good feeling of IsraAid home with you. We could all use it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
It was just wonderful. These people are seriously help them. Tony and Judith, you should get them both. You know, Judith is a professor of nursing at UCLA.